All right, everybody, we are going to be putting the finishing touches on our food service website today in a couple of different steps. And we're going to start by adding the rest of our content using the Photoshop Extractor. So, where we left off last time, your web page should be looking like this, where we've got our logo, we've got our menu, we've got the functioning image carousel, and then we've got just a bunch of placeholder text for everything else. So now we're going to fill in all of that. We're going to use a neat tool called the Extractor. It used to be called Photoshop Extract. Now it's called Extract. You should make sure that this is open from the window called Photoshop Extract here, or just Extract. And then you should load your PSD that we made our Photoshop mockup with. So I've got the demo one loaded up in here. It might take a minute or two once you load it for it to be ready to use. But basically, this is a really neat tool that's going to allow us to copy content and style as well, both HTML and CSS from Photoshop into Dreamweaver without needing to do it manually. You can see that it's going to automatically extract like the colors and the fonts that are used. We can see the layers that are used. And if you click on any individual object, like this header here, you have the option of copying the text or copying the CSS, which is super cool. It has all of the properties, the sizes, the fonts, the families, all of that. So we're going to use the Photoshop Extractor to build in the content for our 3 rows as well as our footer. So to get started, let's select this first header and copy the text. And then we're going to, it's a little tricky, I'm going to move this over. You can also add it to your menu bar here. It just makes it a bit wider, but if you're using multiple screens, that's good. Otherwise, just try and keep it out of the way. And we're going to pop over to our row 1. So right now, there is just our placeholder text in row 1. Let's select that and paste with the text that we had selected. Want to make sure that that is wrapped right there. But we don't want this to be a paragraph. We want this to be an H1. So 2 ways that we can change that. One, we could just go in and change each of these P's to H1, but we can also use the properties panel. If you don't have the properties panel, you can make sure it's displaying with window. And then we can just change it from this dropdown from paragraph to H1. So it's automatically going to change the tags there, ready to go. Next up, let us get our subheader here, which is going to be some H2 text. So I'm going to put that in here. We're going to insert, I need my insert menu here. We're going to get some HTML content, and we are going to put it in as an H2. So if you insert an H2, it's going to put in some placeholder text, and we're going to paste it with our cake design. Really important that this is H1 and this is H2 because it's going to be important when we come back and use the CSS styling later. So that's the content for our row 1 ready to go. I'm going to make sure that that is wrapped right there as well. Now for H2, or for row 2, row 2 is a little complicated because in our CSS, or in our Photoshop design, we've got these 3 columns that each have an icon and a label. Right now in row 2, scroll down a little bit, in row 2 we just have the same thing, which is just this placeholder text. So we actually need to add a little bit more structure. So first let's delete this column div that we made. Going to delete that. So we just want to have our container and then our div class that is row 2. This is where it gets a little bit tricky because we're going to be nesting a couple things inside of each other. So first we're going to add a new bootstrap row, grid row with columns. So because we want 3 columns, we're going to add the 3 columns here. So again, it's going to automatically create a row and then 3 columns within each of that. But because we want to have centered content that's stacked in 2 rows essentially in each column, we need to add 1 more row inside of here. So with this placeholder content selected that is in the column, the first column of this row, we're going to add 1 more grid column with row, and we're going to make 1 column. So I know this is getting a little tricky, but we've got our container, we've got our div class that is the row 2, we've got a row, we've got the column that is our first column, and then within that column we created a row that has its own column. So I'm going to delete this placeholder content. That should have done it. And then we want to put the content for this first column in this place here. So we're going to be putting two things in here, the icon and the H3 that's going to be, this label here. So to do this icon, the way we're going to do this is with Bootstrap. Bootstrap has its own icons built in that we can use for free. I'm going to pull this up here. So if you go to icons.getbootstrap.com, you're going to see we've got a whole bunch of different icons that you can choose from. And I'm going to start just with a couple of placeholder icons right now that we can always go back and add more stylized icons to later. They don't have a ton of food icons here, but hopefully we can find some things that are useful. There are also third-party icons that we can use if we want as well. But easiest ones are the ones that come in with Bootstrap. So if you click on any one icon, you're going to see that it comes in a bunch of different sizes. Here's the HTML you need. All we need to do is copy this. And we're going to go within this placeholder content here. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to paste the content that we want for the icon. Last up, I'm going to add some HTML. We're going to add an H3. Super important that these are H3, and I'm going to put the label for my first one, which is Custom Designs. Now let's save this, and let's give it a little preview to see how this icon looks. Took a second there, but all right, we've got our content for our first one, we've got our cool little icon, and we've got custom designs. Awesome. So what I'm going to do now to speed this up is I'm going to copy this and paste it to the other two columns. So I'm going to make sure that I have the right thing selected. So we want to make sure that we're getting the row. So from row to the end of the div row, we're going to have the row, the column, the icon, the H3, all of that jazz. We're going to copy it, and we're going to go to this placeholder content in the second column. We're going to paste that, and we're going to do the same thing for the third one. I'm going to save that and go back to my preview here and refresh. So now I should have something like this, where we've got 3 labels and 3 icons. I'm going to update these. I can use my extractor here to copy the text. I'm going to paste that for the second one. All natural ingredients. And then special occasions is my last one. And I'm going to make sure that this wraps back around. And I'm going to save this and go back to my preview. Awesome. Looking good. So, last but not least now, not last but not least, second to last but not least, we need to go into our third row. And we're going to use the same method of replacing the content here. So in the third row, we want to get this header, which is our H1. And we are going to go and paste it into the placeholder text. And like the first row, we're going to use the property panel here. I need to refresh to switch it from a paragraph to a heading 1. So that should be a heading 1. And then right after the heading 1, we're going to insert the Bootstrap component that is a large Bootstrap button. So I've got a bunch of different button options here. Oops, inserted a warning button. I don't want that. I want a large button, and we'll always go back and style this later. We just want to make sure we've got a functioning button there. Last but not least then, for our final row here is the footer, and we want to put our contents into the footer. So we want to make sure that we've got our little copyright text, which I can't remember whether or not we did that in our Photoshop exercise, but it's basically just a little copyright message here, so it should just say copyright. Let's make it 2020, and then your company, whatever your food service website is, and we need to make sure that this is a paragraph. So right now it has no formatting, but if we select it there, it's going to wrap it in a paragraph. Last but not least for this, we need to insert our social media icons. So we're going to go to HTML on the insert panel, insert image, and then in your folder here, you should have a folder with your saved images. I'm going to insert the one, which is the Photoshop, and then just do that for each of the 4. Make sure that each time I'm putting my cursor after the next one, so I'm not replacing it. Excellent. So let's go take a look now at what our website with content is looking like. Still lacking some style, but we've got our content for row 1, we've got our contents for row 2, contents for row 3, including the button, and then social media icons for row 4. And that is it for adding our style. Next up, we're going to be adding the CSS.